In debates and discussions, whether they happen in politics, the media, or everyday life, it's common for people to attack the credibility or character of their opponents rather than addressing the argument itself. This tactic is known as an ad hominem attack, a logical fallacy in which the focus is shifted from the argument to the person making the argument. The term ad hominem comes from Latin and means to the person, reflecting the idea that these attacks target the individual rather than the issue at hand. Ad hominem attacks are considered fallacies because they do not engage with the substance of the argument. Instead of addressing the logic or evidence of the opposing view, the attacker tries to undermine the argument by attacking the character, motives, or other personal attributes of the person presenting it. In essence, the tactic shifts the debate from a rational discussion of ideas to a personal confrontation, hoping that discrediting the person will discredit their argument. For example, imagine a debate about whether a particular economic policy will be effective. Instead of responding to the data and reasoning behind the policy, an opponent might say, "Well, you're not an economist, so what do you know?" Or, "You've been wrong before. Why should we listen to you now?" These attacks on the individual fail to engage with the actual argument being made, diverting attention away from the relevant points and instead focusing on irrelevant personal factors. Ad hominem attacks are common because they are easy to make and often emotionally charged. When people feel strongly about an issue, they may find it easier to attack the messenger than to refute the message. This can make ad hominem attacks particularly powerful in public debates, where emotional appeals often carry more weight than reasoned arguments. In this video, we'll explore the psychology behind ad hominem attacks, the different types of ad hominem fallacies, and real-world examples of how they are used to derail discussions. We'll also discuss strategies for recognizing and countering ad hominem attacks, so you can stay focused on the substance of the debate and avoid being drawn into personal confrontations. Ad hominem attacks are not just a rhetorical trick. They tap into fundamental aspects of human psychology. To understand why these attacks are so common and effective, we need to explore the psychological mechanisms that make personal attacks appealing in heated debates. One of the main reasons ad hominem attacks are so prevalent is that they rely on emotional appeal rather than logic. When people feel threatened or defensive in an argument, they may resort to personal attacks as a way to deflect attention away from the issue and make themselves feel more secure. By attacking the character of their opponent, they can shift the debate from the realm of reason into the realm of emotion, where it is harder to respond with facts and logic. Ad hominem attacks often provoke strong emotional reactions, both from the person being attacked and from the audience. For example, if someone is accused of being dishonest or untrustworthy, the audience may instinctively question the credibility of that person's argument, even if the attack is baseless. This emotional reaction can be powerful enough to override rational thinking, leading people to dismiss the argument without considering its merits. Another psychological factor that contributes to the use of ad hominem attacks is cognitive dissonance, the discomfort we feel when confronted with information that contradicts our beliefs. When people are faced with an argument that challenges their deeply held views, they may experience cognitive dissonance and seek to resolve this discomfort by attacking the source of the argument rather than addressing the content. For example, if someone strongly believes in a particular political ideology, they may find it difficult to engage with opposing arguments on a rational level. Instead of considering the evidence and reasoning behind the opposing view, they might respond by attacking the person making the argument, saying something like, "You're just saying that because you're a partisan hack." In this way, the ad hominem attack serves as a defense mechanism to protect the individual's worldview from being challenged. The illusion of credibility. Ad hominem attacks also play on the idea that credibility is essential to making a valid argument. While it's true that a person's expertise or trustworthiness can lend weight to their argument, attacking someone's character or motives does not necessarily invalidate their claims. However, ad hominem attacks create the illusion that discrediting the person automatically discredits their argument. For example, if someone argues in favor of a public health policy, their opponent might respond by pointing out that the person has no formal medical training. While it's important to consider the qualifications of those making claims, dismissing their argument solely based on this factor ignores the possibility that the argument could still be valid. By focusing on the person rather than the evidence, ad hominem attacks create the illusion that the argument can be dismissed without further examination. Group identity and polarization. Ad hominem attacks are also closely related to group identity and the polarization that often arises in public debates. People tend to identify with certain groups based on shared beliefs, values, or political affiliations. When a person from an opposing group presents an argument, it can be tempting to attack them personally rather than engaging with their ideas, as this helps to reinforce in-group cohesion and the sense of us versus them. For example, in political debates, it's common for individuals to attack opponents by calling them liberals, conservatives, or other politically charged labels, as if these identities alone discredit the person's argument. This form of ad hominem attack appeals to group loyalty, as it reinforces the idea that people from the opposing side cannot be trusted, regardless of the validity of their arguments. Chapter 2. Different types of ad hominem attacks. Ad hominem attacks come in various forms, and understanding the different types can help us recognize when they are being used and why they are fallacious. Let's explore some of the most common types of ad hominem attacks. Abusive ad hominem. The most straightforward form of ad hominem attack is the abusive ad hominem, where the speaker directly insults or demeans their opponent in an attempt to discredit them. This type of attack is often emotionally charged and designed to provoke a reaction. For example, in a debate about environmental policy, one person might say, "You're an idiot if you think that policy will work." Rather than engaging with the reasoning behind the argument, the speaker resorts to name-calling in an effort to discredit the other person. Abusive ad hominem attacks are easy to recognize because they are overtly hostile and personal. However, their emotional impact can make them effective in diverting attention away from the substance of the debate. Circumstantial ad hominem. A circumstantial ad hominem occurs when someone argues that a person's position is biased or motivated by personal interests, rather than addressing the argument itself. This type of attack suggests that the person's circumstances, such as their financial interests, political affiliations, or personal background, disqualify them from making a valid argument. For example, in a debate about education reform, one person might say, "Of course you support this policy, you're a teacher, and it benefits you financially." While the speaker may be pointing out a potential conflict of interest, this does not address whether the policy is good or bad. Instead, the attack focuses on the person's motivations rather than the merits of the argument. Circumstantial ad hominem attacks are more subtle than abusive ones, but they are still fallacious because they shift the focus away from the argument and onto the individual's personal situation. Tu quoque, U2. The tu quoque fallacy, also known as the U2 fallacy, is a type of ad hominem attack where the speaker accuses their opponent of hypocrisy rather than addressing their argument. The idea is that if the opponent is guilty of the same behavior they are criticizing, their argument is invalid. For example, in a debate about the importance of reducing carbon emissions, one person might say, "You're telling me to drive less, but you fly on planes all the time. Why should I listen to you?" While it may be true that the person's behavior is inconsistent with their argument, this does not automatically invalidate the argument itself. The question of whether reducing carbon emissions is important should be evaluated on its own merits, regardless of whether the speaker is a hypocrite. The tu quoque fallacy is particularly effective because it shifts the focus away from the issue and onto the personal behavior of the speaker, making it easier to dismiss the argument without engaging with it. Guilt by association. Another form of ad hominem attack is guilt by association, where a person's argument is discredited because of their connection to an unpopular or disreputable group or individual. The speaker suggests that because the person is associated with someone or something objectionable, their argument must also be flawed. For example, in a debate about foreign policy, one person might say, "You're just saying that because you support that corrupt politician." By associating the person with a disreputable figure, the speaker hopes to discredit their argument without addressing its substance. Guilt by association is fallacious because it assumes that the merits of the argument are inherently tied to the person or group the speaker is associated with, rather than evaluating the argument on its own. This tactic can be especially effective in highly polarized debates, where associations with certain groups or figures carry strong negative connotations. Ad hominem. An ad hominem attack is a specific type of ad hominem that targets a person based on their gender, suggesting that their argument is invalid because of their sex or gender identity. This fallacy is particularly common in discussions of issues that are perceived to be gendered, such as reproductive rights, workplace discrimination, or leadership. For example, during a debate about equal pay, someone might say, "You're only saying..." This dismisses the issue by their gender and therefore not worth considering. Attacks are a form of identity-based dismissal, where the focus is on discrediting someone's argument by pointing to characteristics that have nothing to do with the argument itself. This can also apply to other identity markers such as race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. Chapter 3. Real-world examples of ad hominem attacks. To better understand how ad hominem attacks function in practice, let's look at some real-world examples from political debates, media commentary, and public discourse. These cases highlight how personal attacks can derail meaningful conversations and create a toxic environment for rational debate. Political debates. One of the most common places where ad hominem attacks occur is in political debates. Politicians often resort to personal attacks as a way to deflect attention from their opponent's arguments, or to undermine their credibility in the eyes of voters. For example, during a debate about economic policy, one politician might say, "You're a millionaire, so of course you don't care about working class people." This is a circumstantial ad hominem attack, as it suggests that the politician's wealth disqualifies them from making a valid argument about economic policy. The personal attack distracts from the substance of the argument and shifts the focus to the individual's circumstances. In another case, a politician might respond to criticism by accusing their opponent of hypocrisy, saying, "You talk about being tough on crime, but you supported policies that let criminals off the hook." This is a tu quoque fallacy because it attacks the opponent's past behavior rather than addressing the current argument about crime policy. Media commentary. Ad hominem attacks are also common in media commentary, where pundits and commentators often use personal attacks to discredit political figures, activists, or public figures they disagree with. These attacks can take the form of insults, accusations of bias, or questioning the person's motives. For example, during a discussion about gun control, a commentator might say, "Of course you want to ban guns, you're just a liberal trying to take away our rights." This circumstantial ad hominem suggests that the person's political affiliation automatically discredits their argument, rather than engaging with the substance of the debate. Similarly, media outlets sometimes use guilt by association to discredit individuals based on their affiliations. For instance, a commentator might say, "You can't trust this person's opinion on foreign policy because they once worked for a government that violated human rights." While the association might be relevant in certain contexts, it does not automatically invalidate the person's arguments on the specific issue being discussed. Social media and online discussions. In online discussions and social media platforms, ad hominem attacks are rampant. The anonymity and distance provided by the internet often make it easier for people to resort to personal attacks, turning debates into personal confrontations rather than thoughtful exchanges of ideas. For example, in an online debate about healthcare, someone might respond to a well-reasoned argument with, "You're just an idiot who doesn't understand how healthcare works." This abusive ad hominem attack doesn't address the points made in the argument and instead attempts to undermine the speaker's credibility through insults. Another common ad hominem attack on social media is the use of tu quoque fallacies. For example, in a debate about environmental protection, someone might say, "You drive a car, so you're a hypocrite for caring about the environment." This shifts the focus from the merits of environmental protection to the personal behavior of the speaker, diverting attention away from the actual argument.
Remember to like and subscribe for more video content. Sapiens quae vigilat.